All right, Matthew chapter 8, verse 1. When he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him. And behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Man, if you will, you can. What a powerful statement of faith. The leper humbly postures himself before Jesus, falling to his knees and addressing him as Lord. He then proceeds in a manner we would not expect. The leper, rather than asking Jesus to be healed, he proclaims what he believes Jesus can do. If you will, you can make me clean. The leper believes that whatever Jesus wills to be, will be. Jesus meets him in that very moment with a powerful proclamation of his own. He says, I will be clean. Period. Done. It is. The leper was made well. Ever since I read this passage back in October of 2023, nearly a year ago, the phrase, if you will, you can, has stuck with me in my head, just running around there like the hamster wheel. It's such a powerful reminder and has blessed me so greatly in the last couple months that wherever we find ourselves or whatever we're going through, any situation, God can make a way if he wills. No matter the trial, the tragedy, if he wills, he can. What we're about to see over and over again through this devotional, and as we follow Jesus' miraculous works, is that if he wills it to be, it will be, and he can. Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 10 and 13. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following him, truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. And to the centurion, Jesus said, go and let it be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed in that very moment. The centurion, unlike the leper, was a very distinguished man of great power and authority. But like the leper, he also humbles himself before Jesus, saying, Lord, I am not even worthy for you to come under my roof. The humility of the centurion is a great lesson on its own, but even greater still is the next. You see, the centurion then says to Jesus, only say the word and my servant will be healed. Only say the word. Jesus marvels, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. And just like the leper, we see a man who believes Jesus is who he says he is, and that he can do what's being asked. If you will, you can. Matthew 8:23. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, save us, Lord, we are perishing. And he said to them, why are you afraid, O you of little faith? Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, what sort of man is this, that even the wind and sea obey him? Jesus' disciples, gripped with fear, eyes fixed on the power and the might of the storm, when they could no longer navigate the perilous storm, they cried out to Jesus in a last-ditch effort, save us, Lord, can't you see we're perishing? But before calming the sea, Jesus first speaks, why are you afraid, O you of little faith? You see, the power and the might of the storm had stolen both the disciples' peace and their attention. They had forgotten who was with them, Jesus, the Prince of Peace, who, by the way, was sleeping in the front of the boat. This is a very important lesson to be learned here. Believing Jesus is who he says he is one thing. It's another to have faith in him amidst the storms of life. I heard it said once that you can believe a parachute would carry you safely to the ground if you jumped out of an airplane. But faith is what enables you to actually put on the parachute and jump out of the airplane. In the disciples' case, they must have believed Jesus could rescue them, or they wouldn't have bothered asking. However, Jesus does address their lack of faith. Why are you afraid, O you of little faith? You see, Jesus had already commanded demons to flee at this point, the blind to see, the lame to walk, and yet the disciples were still afraid. Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. The disciples marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The disciples learned in this moment that Jesus commands everything, even creation. And may we, the church, not only believe Jesus is who he says he is, but also have faith in what he can do if only he wills. Matthew chapter 9, 20 through 22. And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up to him and touched him on the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his garment, I will be made well." Jesus turned and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, for your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. Man, your faith has made you well. The woman had been bleeding for 12 years and was determined to reach Jesus. In Luke's account, he states, "And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone." Man, she had exhausted all of her options, her resources, and she was without hope until Jesus. And when Jesus heals her, he says, "Your faith has made you well." Jesus is not saying that her faith was the power that healed her. The power to heal her clearly came out of Jesus. What Jesus is saying is that her faith to believe in him, that he could do what no one else could, had healed her. If she had not stepped out in faith and sought out Jesus, she would not have been healed. Faith was not the power, but it was the conduit by which the power was flowing. Okay, Matthew chapter 9, 27 through 31. And as Jesus passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying aloud, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." And when he entered the house, the blind man came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith be it done for you." And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, "See to it that no one knows about it." But they went away and spread his fame through all the district. Jesus says, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" I love how personal Jesus is. He doesn't just wave his hand and heal these men. They can't even see him. Rather, he approaches them and has arguably the most important conversation anyone could ever have with Jesus. Do you believe in me? Jesus didn't ask what they wanted. He asked if they believed. These men obviously had great faith because Jesus said, "According to your faith, be it done for you." They believed Jesus was who he said he was and that he could have mercy on them. Mark chapter 10, verse 46. And they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting on the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. Man, Bartimaeus believed Jesus was who he said he was, saying, "Son of David," right? "Have mercy on me." We also see that Bartimaeus believes Jesus has the power to extend the mercy which he was asking. He says, "Let me recover my sight." Jesus restores his sight, saying, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." Again here with the "your faith has made you well" statement. Jesus was the cure to Bartimaeus' ailment, but faith was the access. Faith to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that he held the outcome in his hands, having power to have mercy on him or not. Something else here I think is really awesome to point out. It always catches my eye, right? Jesus says, "Go your way." But the man does not. He follows Jesus on the way. Jesus is the way, he's the truth and the life. May he open our eyes to follow him as well on the way. Mark chapter 9, verse 17. And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I have brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." And he answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. And it has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible for the one who believes." Immediately, the father of the child cried out and said, "I believe, help my unbelief." And when Jesus saw that the crowd was coming together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out. And the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you?" One rebuke for three different scenarios. One, the crowd was not following Jesus because they believed in who he was, but because they had had their fill of bread and or their physical needs met, as it says in John chapter 6, 26 and also 36. The second group was the scribes and the Pharisees. They were without faith as well, saying Jesus was casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub, who is the prince of the demons. And the third group, Jesus' very own disciples. These men had been training for 3 years or so, somewhere in there, to carry out Jesus' ministry. And they still lacked the faith to do what Jesus had given them authority to do, cast out demons. So 3 parties, 1 rebuke, 1 cure. Believe. Jesus responds to the Father's faithless question, right? The Father said, "But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus responds with his own question. "If I can, where have you been? Have you not heard? All of you for that matter. Have you forgotten? Why do you doubt?" In Matthew 14, verse 31, it says, "Faithless generation. How have you forgotten? Why do you doubt? O faithless generation." Man, although Jesus had every right to give up on all 3 of these parties, leaving them behind without any miracles, Jesus did not. He pressed in, saying, "All things are possible for the one who believes." And the Father responds correctly and honestly, "I believe, help my unbelief." And this is possibly the most important thing that we can take away from this whole devotional as we're reading scripture, acknowledging the tragic state of who we are as people, unbelieving and in need of Jesus. The boy's father asked Jesus to make up for what he had lacked, and Jesus does. May we also bring our weakness to Jesus with the same plea. Give us faith to believe, help our unbelief. So later that day, just a couple verses later, verse 28 says this, "And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, 'Why could we not cast it out?' And he said to them, 'This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer.'" And again in Matthew's gospel, chapter 17, verse 19, "Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, 'Why could we not cast it out?' He said to them, 'Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, You will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Nothing will be impossible for you, right? So we're seeing prayer and faith. John Piper says it this way: it was not the amount of faith that was lacking, but trusting in the object of their faith, which is Jesus. They were not trusting in him. It was not the quantity of faith that mattered, but the person upon whom their faith was founded. The faith of the disciples should have been rooted and grounded on the person of Christ, but instead they were relying on themselves and their own abilities instead of Christ's strength. Prayer or faith, take your pick. The disciples did not act on faith in Jesus to cast out the demon, nor did they stop to pray, which resulted in nothing, right? Jesus says in John 5:5, right? I am the vine and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Right? This treatment was not only for his disciples either. In Jesus' hometown, the people were skeptical of Jesus' power and his miraculous works, and they took offense at him, and they did not believe Jesus was who he said he was. And he did not do many mighty works. They did not believe Jesus was who he said he was. We see in Matthew 13, verse 58, this, and he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Throughout the Gospels, we find the same occurrence over and over again, right? Jesus moved in the miraculous when people had faith to believe that he was who he said he was and that he was able to do what they asked of him. Jesus heard the pleas of humility and faith and belief and moved in mercy and power over and over again. No, it's what we don't see in the previously mentioned passages. But oftentimes, God says no to our requests. Even though the formula was spot on, right? Humility, belief, faith, even when God could have been greatly glorified in answering our pleas, sometimes he still says no. Matthew 26, verse 39. And going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Again, for the second time, he went away and prayed, My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words again. So Jesus teaches us what our prayers and petitions should look like. He believed his Father was who he was and that he could do what Jesus, his Son, was asking of him. But here's the most important part. Jesus says, nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Man, when we come humbly to God in prayer and full of faith, believing that he can do what we're asking and so much more, we have to remember that none of this determines the outcome. His will is what determines the outcome. His will is perfect. Man, this part may sound discouraging, but just trust the process, right? Your faith is not in vain. If he did not want us to petition his will, he would not have asked us to. He wants us to come to him open-handed with our pleas and our petitions and cast them at his feet, right? We see this in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. It says, Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all knowledge, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. There is great peace to be had here, peace that surpasses all understanding. Even when God says no, even when he says wait or not yet, his plan and his will are perfect and good. May we be a church that prays bold prayers in faith, believing Jesus can do the very thing that we are asking for, with outstretched arms and open hands, trusting our faithful Father who gives good gifts and in his time works all things according to his perfect will for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose, right? Have faith, for without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Hebrews 11:6. And without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So have faith. Man, I'll leave you with this one last thought. O you of little faith, right? Jesus makes this statement over and over again in the Gospels. But what about us? Do we have little faith? Is our faith abundant enough to believe that Jesus can do whatever we ask? I'm not talking about faith to believe that Jesus is going to do what we ask, i.e., like, I'm not healed because I didn't believe enough that Jesus was going to do it. But rather, do we have faith to believe that God can do anything we ask? Matthew chapter 19, verse 26. But Jesus looked at them and said, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Man, so it is not a matter of if God can do it, but if he wills. I pray that our faith to believe may be the conduit by which Jesus moves in power to heal, to save, to show mercy toward his bride and this lost and broken world that we live in. Man, remember, we are only responsible to have faith and to believe. The outcome is up to God. So rest in the Prince of Peace and let God take care of his will. So 1 John chapter 5, verse 14. And this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. Have faith, believe, and cast those cares at his feet. He's a good Father, and trust him in his timing. Hey, thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share with somebody that you think it might encourage. Also, hit that bell notification so that you can be made aware of any new content that's coming out. Hey, keep worshiping.